Val Kilmer utterly hated Marlon Brando. Now we know the reason why, and that reason cost a studio nearly $100 million and almost destroyed both of their careers. Picture this: a remote jungle set in 1996. The temperature, a sweltering 100 degrees. Two Hollywood titans facing off like gunslingers, one refusing to wear pants, the other burning with rage so intense the crew could feel it from 50 feet away. What started as Hollywood's most ambitious creature feature spiraled into what insiders call the most catastrophic celebrity feud in film history. The stories that emerged from that fateful production would become legendary. Kilmer allegedly refused to speak Brando's name for years afterward. Brando reportedly demanded that his dialogue be fed to him through a radio earpiece, sometimes picking up police frequencies mid-scene. And somewhere between the typhoons, firings, and psychological warfare, a $40 million budget ballooned to almost 4 times that amount. Was it artistic temperament or something far more personal that turned these two acting powerhouses into mortal enemies? Subscribe now. You'll want to hear this one from beginning to end. Before we dive into the explosive confrontation that would leave Hollywood insiders speechless, we need to understand the man at the center of our story. Val Edward Kilmer wasn't just any actor. He was a force of nature wrapped in California sunshine and uncompromising intensity. Born in Los Angeles on December 31st, 1959, Kilmer came into this world as the son of aerospace equipment distributor Eugene Kilmer and his wife Gladys. His childhood unfolded against the backdrop of the Chatsworth neighborhood's Golden Hills, where his parents owned a sprawling 3,500-acre ranch. But this idyllic beginning would soon be shattered. At just 8 years old, young Val's parents divorced, fracturing his sense of stability and planting seeds of intensity that would later define his career. Tragedy struck again in 1977 when Val's younger brother Wesley drowned in a jacuzzi after suffering an epileptic seizure. The loss devastated the 17-year-old Kilmer, reportedly instilling in him a profound sense that life was precious and art must be pursued with absolute conviction. "I never recovered from my brother's death," Kilmer allegedly confided to a director years later. "It made me understand that every performance could be my last." This early brush with mortality gave Kilmer an almost religious devotion to his craft. At the tender age of 17, Kilmer became the youngest person ever accepted to the prestigious Juilliard School's drama division. Let that sink in. While most teenagers were figuring out prom dates, Kilmer was training alongside future legends in one of the most competitive acting programs on earth. Those hallowed halls shaped him into something extraordinary, and some would say, extraordinarily difficult. His classmates at Juilliard reported that even then, Kilmer displayed the laser-focused intensity that would later make directors both adore and dread working with him. One instructor reportedly said, "Val doesn't just play a character, he inhabits them to the point where I sometimes wonder if he can find his way back." This wasn't just method acting. This was something more consuming, more dangerous. Can you imagine the pressure cooker of talent and ego brewing inside this young man? Type in the comments if you've ever known someone with that kind of overwhelming dedication to their passion. Kilmer's professional journey began in earnest with the 1984 absurdist comedy Top Secret, where he showcased not just acting chops but surprising musical talent. But it was his portrayal of the cocky, ice-cold fighter pilot Iceman in 1986's Top Gun that catapulted him into the stratosphere of Hollywood stardom. Those piercing eyes, that confident smirk. Kilmer didn't just steal scenes, he owned them with a magnetism that left audiences breathless. What many don't know is that behind that iconic performance lurked a perfectionist who reportedly drove director Tony Scott to the brink of madness. Kilmer allegedly questioned every line, every motivation, pushing for a deeper understanding of a character that many actors would have played as a simple antagonist. By the early 1990s, Kilmer had established himself as one of Hollywood's most versatile and committed performers. His transformation into Jim Morrison for Oliver Stone's The Doors, 1991, wasn't just acting, it was a spiritual possession. Kilmer reportedly spent months living and breathing as Morrison, learning to sing over 50 songs and fooling even former Doors bandmates with his uncanny impersonation. I couldn't tell the difference between Val and Jim in the studio, Doors keyboardist Ray Manzarek allegedly remarked after hearing Kilmer's recordings. It was eerie, like Jim had returned. This watershed performance solidified Kilmer's reputation as an actor willing to go to extraordinary, and some would say obsessive lengths for authenticity. But it also revealed something studios were beginning to whisper about. Val Kilmer might be brilliant, but he came with a hurricane of complications. Stay with me here, because what happened next would set the stage for the explosive confrontation with Brando years later. In 1993, Kilmer stepped into the Batsuit for Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, replacing Michael Keaton and inheriting one of Hollywood's most lucrative franchises. The pressure was immense, the costume reportedly a torture chamber of rubber and limited visibility. But instead of embracing the blockbuster mentality, Kilmer allegedly approached the Caped Crusader with the same intensity he'd given Jim Morrison. The results were combustible. Studio executives reportedly found Kilmer impossible, demanding script rewrites and challenging Schumacher's vision at every turn. Crew members allegedly began calling him Psycho Kilmer behind his back. In one jaw-dropping incident, Kilmer reportedly refused to speak to Schumacher for 2 weeks during filming, communicating only through intermediaries. When later asked about working with Kilmer, Schumacher didn't mince words. Val was the most psychologically troubled human being I've ever worked with. If you're enjoying this dive into Hollywood's most intense personalities, hit subscribe now. We're just getting warmed up, and our next video drops tomorrow. By 1995, Val Kilmer had earned a reputation that followed him like a shadow, brilliant but impossible. The whispers in Hollywood boardrooms were getting louder. He's box office gold, but at what cost? Executives reportedly asked. His intensity had crossed from dedication into something more concerning, a star whose perfectionism had morphed into a liability. His personal life mirrored this turbulence. Kilmer's marriage to actress Joanne Whalley had crumbled under the weight of his all-consuming approach to acting. They divorced in 1996 after 8 years of marriage and 2 children. Friends reportedly said that Kilmer couldn't turn off the characters he played, bringing them home like unwelcome guests who wouldn't leave. What makes a man push himself and everyone around him to such extremes? Some colleagues speculated it stemmed from that early trauma of losing his brother. Others suggested it was the curse of genius, an inability to tolerate mediocrity when excellence was possible. Kilmer himself rarely addressed these criticisms directly, instead immersing himself deeper into each new role. "I'm not difficult," he reportedly told Vanity Fair. "I'm just prepared and I care." But Hollywood told a different story. By 1996, when pre-production began on The Island of Dr. Moreau, Kilmer's name sent mixed signals through the industry, undeniable talent wrapped in a package of unpredictable behavior and skyrocketing demands. It's important to note that Kilmer wasn't just difficult for difficulty's sake. Behind his infamous reputation was an artist with an almost religious devotion to truth and performance. He reportedly studied indigenous cultures extensively for his role in Thunderheart, lived in the wilderness to prepare for The Ghost in the Darkness, and insisted on performing his own stunts whenever possible. This commitment extended beyond the camera. In perhaps the most unexpected chapter of his pre-Brando career, Kilmer purchased a ranch in New Mexico, connecting with local Native American communities and embracing aspects of their spiritual practices. This wasn't Hollywood tourism. Colleagues reported that Kilmer seemed genuinely transformed by these experiences. Blink and you'll miss the Francis Ford Coppola cameo in this story. Kilmer reportedly turned down a role in The Godfather Part 3 to do The Doors, a decision that allegedly infuriated the legendary director, but demonstrated Kilmer's unwavering artistic priorities. Are you Team Val so far, or does his intensity seem too much? Type your answer now. I'm curious what you're thinking at this point. Now, as fate would have it, in early 1996, Kilmer was coming off the demanding shoot of The Ghost in the Darkness when the call came for The Island of Dr. Moreau. The original star, Bruce Willis, had unexpectedly dropped out, and director John Frankenheimer was desperate for a bankable replacement. What few knew was that Kilmer had initially been cast in a smaller role in the film. But with Willis gone, Kilmer was suddenly elevated to co-lead alongside, you guessed it, Marlon Brando himself. The stage was set for a collision of titanic egos that would soon become Hollywood. But before we dive into that explosive encounter, let's paint the picture of Val Kilmer's mindset entering this ill-fated production. By all accounts, Kilmer was at a crossroads. His stint as Batman had ended after just one film. He'd reportedly turned down $10 million to reprise the role, a decision that baffled studios and cemented his reputation as unpredictable. Moreover, Kilmer was reportedly struggling with the aftermath of his divorce, his spiritual explorations in New Mexico, and a growing frustration with Hollywood's commercial demands. He was a volcano of contradictions, craving artistic respect while behaving in ways that alienated the very people who could grant it. When he arrived in Australia for The Island of Dr. Moreau, Kilmer brought with him this perfect storm of personal turmoil and professional intensity. And waiting for him was perhaps the only man in Hollywood whose legendary status and difficult reputation exceeded his own: Marlon Brando. What many don't realize is that Kilmer had idolized Brando throughout his career. In interviews, he'd cited Brando's revolutionary performances as inspiration for his own immersive approach. "Brando changed everything," Kilmer once reportedly said. "He made acting honest in a way it had never been before." Imagine then the complex emotions brewing as Kilmer prepared to work alongside his hero. Reverence certainly, excitement undoubtedly, but also, and this would prove catastrophic, a burning desire to prove himself as Brando's equal. It was the acting equivalent of Greek tragedy, with hubris setting the stage for an epic fall. The production of The Island of Dr. Moreau was troubled before a single frame was shot. The original director, Richard Stanley, had been fired after 3 days of filming. Tropical storms had destroyed expensive sets. The remote location in the Australian rainforest had everyone on edge before Kilmer and Brando even arrived on set. But no one could have predicted just how spectacularly things would unravel once these two volatile forces of nature collided in the jungle heat. Hollywood insiders still speak of what happened in hushed, traumatized tones. But beneath Kilmer's artistic intensity and spiritual searching burned a slow fuse, one that would detonate catastrophically when he finally came face to face with the legend he once worshipped, Marlon Brando. The power play. It was August 1996 on a sweltering Australian set surrounded by rainforest. The production was already $2 million over budget when Val Kilmer arrived, 3 days late according to crew testimonies. What happened next sent shockwaves through the production. Kilmer allegedly discovered that Brando had negotiated a contract allowing him to work only 3 hours per day, with Fridays off entirely, while collecting a staggering $3.5 million paycheck. Kilmer reportedly erupted, demanding similar treatment. "If the great Marlon only works 3 hours, why should I break my back for 12? Kilmer allegedly shouted at director John Frankenheimer. Professional courtesy died that day in the jungle heat, and with it, any hope for a smooth production. But the opening salvos were mere firecracker pops compared to the dynamite that would follow. EMPH, stay with me. The Ice Cube Standoff, September 1996. A pivotal scene between Brando's Dr. Moreau and Kilmer's Montgomery required both actors on set simultaneously, a logistical nightmare given their growing animosity. Temperatures had reached 108 degrees that day. The makeup effects on the extras were melting. Brando reportedly arrived in a flowing muumuu, refusing traditional pants, with his face painted white and demanding an ice bucket be placed just off camera. When Kilmer arrived, witnesses claim he took one look at Brando's ice bucket and silently removed an ice cube, placing it against his own forehead. When Brando reached for ice during his lines, he allegedly discovered Kilmer had emptied the entire bucket into his own personal cooler. Mr. Kilmer seems to think cold comfort is a limited resource, Brando reportedly announced to the entire crew, refusing to continue until fresh ice was provided. Such petty skirmishes might seem trivial, but in the pressure cooker of a troubled production, they became psychological warfare, and the battle was just heating up. Beat the script burning. By October 1996, the production had spiraled into chaos. Typhoons destroyed sets overnight. The animal wranglers lost control of big cats between takes, and the feud between the two stars had evolved from Cold War to open hostility. During a particularly tense scene, Brando reportedly kept forgetting his lines, relying on an earpiece where an assistant would feed him dialogue. After the ninth take, Kilmer allegedly approached the script supervisor, took her copy of the script, and theatrically set it aflame using a prop torch. "Maybe now we can try some actual acting instead of recitation," Kilmer reportedly announced, staring directly at a speechless Brando. Director John Frankenheimer allegedly had to physically restrain crew members from intervening. When later asked about working with Kilmer, Frankenheimer didn't mince words. "I will never work with Val Kilmer again. There isn't enough money in the world." The damage was irreparable. The impersonation. November 1996. The production limped toward completion, now weeks behind schedule and millions over budget. During a rare moment when both stars were required on set, disaster struck in the form of a mimicry that would cement their hatred. While waiting for technical issues to be resolved, Kilmer allegedly began performing a devastatingly accurate impression of Brando's distinctive speech patterns, not just from their current film, but specifically mocking Brando's performance in The Godfather. Eyewitnesses report that the impersonation was unnervingly perfect, down to Brando's mumbling cadence and physical mannerisms. What made it unforgivable was that Kilmer performed it while standing directly behind Brando for the entertainment of snickering crew members. "I've spent my life creating characters people will remember forever. Some spend theirs as mere photocopies," Brando allegedly responded without turning around. The set fell silent. That single exchange reportedly crystallized everything: Kilmer's insecurity beneath his bravado, Brando's wounded vanity beneath his indifference. Some wounds cut too deep to heal, especially when inflicted by the heroes we once worshipped. MPH, and this one was just beginning to fester. The final cut. February 1997. The tortured production had finally wrapped, but the drama continued into post-production. Both stars reportedly demanded approval of their scenes, creating editing nightmares for the studio. During a private screening, Kilmer allegedly discovered that several of his key scenes had been drastically reduced, while Brando's cryptic, often improvised monologues remained intact. Studio executives reportedly confirmed that Brando's contract gave him unprecedented control over the final cut. "This isn't filmmaking. It's ego preservation for a man whose talent is as bloated as his waistline," Kilmer allegedly told the post-production supervisor. When the comment made its way back to Brando, he reportedly responded with calculating precision. "Mr. Kilmer mistakes volume for impact. The truly great actors know that whispers carry further than shouts." The film was ultimately released to disastrous reviews and devastating box office returns. But the real casualty wasn't New Line Cinema's balance sheet. It was the destruction of what could have been a legendary mentor-protege relationship between two of cinema's most fascinating talents. Be Olada Bata. If you've been in a workplace with toxic personalities colliding, drop a comment. I'm curious how many of you have witnessed similar, if less expensive, professional train wrecks. To understand the depths of this feud, we need to appreciate exactly who Val Kilmer was up against. Marlon Brando wasn't just a star. He was the supernova that changed the very fabric of screen acting forever. Born in 1924 in Omaha, Nebraska, Brando revolutionized performance with his raw, vulnerable approach in A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951. While actors before him declaimed dramatically, Brando mumbled, scratched, and exposed genuine emotion in ways audiences had never seen. His performances in On the Waterfront and The Godfather are routinely ranked among the greatest in cinema history. But by 1996, the brilliant young rebel had become something else entirely, a mercurial legend whose eccentricities had reached mythic proportions. He reportedly refused to memorize lines, insisted on bizarre character choices, and demanded extraordinary accommodations from directors desperate for even a flicker of his fading genius. What made the clash with Kilmer so poetic was the mirror image quality. Brando was confronting a younger version of himself, with all the same uncompromising dedication and difficult behavior that had once made him both revered and reviled. MPH. It was like watching a lion in winter facing a lion in his prime, neither willing to concede an inch of territory. The aftermath of The Island of Dr. Moreau lingered far beyond its 1997 release. The film, which cost an estimated $40 million to produce, earned a catastrophic $27.7 million worldwide and became an instant cautionary tale in Hollywood circles. For Kilmer, the professional consequences were swift and severe. His reputation, already precarious, crumbled further. Major studios reportedly instituted what insiders called the Kilmer Clause, contract provisions specifically designed to penalize difficult behavior on set. Brando, protected by his legendary status, emerged relatively unscathed professionally, but those close to him claimed the experience on Moreau accelerated his retreat from Hollywood. He would appear in only 3 more films before his death in 2004, none approaching the prominence of his earlier work. Perhaps the most telling epilogue came years later when Kilmer, reflecting on the troubled production, reportedly said, "I learned more about what not to do from watching Brando than what to do." It was a statement both gracious and cutting, acknowledging Brando's influence while simultaneously distancing himself from the legend's excesses. The tragedy, of course, is that these two extraordinary talents, separated by generation but united in approach, never found common ground. What might have been a transformative collaboration instead became a cautionary tale about ego, insecurity, and the dangers of meeting your heroes. In 2015, nearly 2 decades after their infamous clash and 11 years after Brando's death, Kilmer was diagnosed with throat cancer. The illness and subsequent treatment transformed the once volatile actor, reportedly giving him perspective on the conflicts that had defined much of his career. Though never directly addressing his feud with Brando in his 2020 memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry, Kilmer wrote about regrets and the price of perfectionism in ways that seemed to reference his tumultuous past. I defended the wrong things, he reportedly wrote, and attacked where no attack was necessary. Hollywood feuds come and go, but few have cost so much, in dollars, careers, and lost opportunities, as the collision between the method actor who changed everything and the intense disciple who followed in his footsteps only to reject his mentor's shadow. So what do you think? Was Val Kilmer justified in his frustration with a fading legend's demands and privileges, or was his behavior toward an icon of cinema unforgivable? Was Brando protecting his legacy or indulging in the very excesses that tarnished it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and if this deep dive into Hollywood's most explosive feud fascinated you, hit that subscribe button right now. Our next video drops tomorrow, exploring the shocking rivalry between 2 beloved Golden Age actresses that ended with one sabotaging the other's Oscar-winning performance. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.